Assalamu alaikum everybody, my name is Jafry and today is the 18th of Ramadan, 1439 AH, and today, beginning today are the days that we come to commemorate the shahadat of our first Imam, Imam Ali alayhi salam, and these are also the days that we're getting into the Laylatul Qadr nights, which are the nights of the 19th, the nights of the 21st, and the night of the 23rd. So these are very critical nights, like the most important nights in Ramadan, where we can make our full opportunities to get as much sawab as possible. And also upcoming this Friday is going to be Quds Day, in which we come out and protest against oppression. So today the topics we're going to be covering are over oppression, and we're going to get into an in-depth discussion about our first Imam, Imam Ali alayhi salam. So to begin our discussion about oppression, Azra, do you have any comment you would like to make on the current state of oppression in our world and what we can do?
Yes, first of all, Assalamu alaikum. Today we're going to address that issue because as Muslims it is so important for us to be informed about the current affairs of the world, and there are so many things going on that many of us aren't aware of because the media doesn't accurately cover these issues. So I mean, there's oppression in every single country, in India, in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, and there's a variety of issues that exist in every single country, like unequal rights for women. In Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan, women aren't given enough rights, and then in India and Pakistan, education's an issue. In Pakistan, you see that girls are struggling to even get a basic education, and then in places like Africa, there's poverty. In every country there's poverty, but there's this cycle and this trend of corrupt governments. Even in countries like America, where we believe we're like the leading nation of the world, there are issues like gun control, and still people are fighting for equal rights because women receive lower pay. So in every corner of the world there is oppression and injustice, and it is our duty as Muslims to stay well informed about this current affairs, because this is the world that we live in, and we can't live in a bubble and just live our own life and worry about our own things, because right now, as you're watching this or as we're speaking, there are people on the other parts of the world who are going through so much, and it's our duty to know what is happening and to be aware, and to in fact not only remain aware ourselves, but to spread the awareness to other people, because the more people who find out about these things, then the more we can do to collectively make a change, make a positive change for these people who don't really have the resources to make a change for their own selves.
Yes. Great, a very interesting point made, Azra, that yes, all around the globe, there's many oppression happening throughout the globe. For example, in Syria, how the people are being killed. Like when you're looking online, when you're looking at the pictures of the children, they have blood on their faces and they're injured. It really occurs to me, that we shouldn't just be sitting here. We should, even though we can't go over there, we can't physically do anything, we should do what's in our capability to contribute to and to make a change in our society, because there's oppression happening, like Azra mentioned, all around us. There's like in Pakistan, the unequal rights for the girls, like they can't simply get an education, and so there's like all around the globe, there's all of these oppressions happening. And for example, in Yemen, in Pakistan, in India, there's Shia killings happening. And so our job as Muslims in the Western society living in the United States, our job is to come out and to protest, to do what's in our capabilities to make a change, like to the extent we can. And for example, like I mentioned, Quds Day is coming this Friday, so that's a great opportunity for us all to go out and protest. So speaking about the oppressions that are happening in the world, Azra, do you want to give us like a history about what happened in Palestine? Because nowadays we're always protesting for Palestine, but a lot of us, we don't know exactly what happened, like what led to the conflicts that are occurring currently. So Azra, here, would you like to give us a history about that?
Yes, this is a really brief history lesson, but it is true, a lot of people aren't aware of how the Israelis actually came into Palestine, what started it all. So it all started officially in 1917, November 2nd, 1917, when the British sent out their statement in support for the establishment of the Jews in Palestine. So this was called the Balfour Declaration of 1917. I'm sure a lot of you have heard it. So basically that was the way of the British to support the Jews coming in and occupying this land, and to make it a home for the Jewish people. So in 1947, that's when the newly formed United Nations agreed to create separate zones in that land because there were so many conflicts from 1917 to 1947. So the UN said, fine, we're going to have two different zones. We're going to have Israel for the Jews, and then we're going to have Palestine for the Arabs, which is quite interesting because they said that Israel's for the Jews and Palestine's for the Arabs. They didn't say Muslims because at that time, and even today, there are not only Muslims living in Palestine, there are lots of Christians and people of other religions there. So they said, okay, whoever's not coming in as a Jew, they're going to have Palestine. So that's really important that we should mention later that Palestine is not an issue of just Muslim for Muslim. It's Muslim for, whoever lives in Palestine, all of the people there. So in 1947, they decided to divide the land into zones, and then the British withdrew from the region in that very same year, the next year, 1948, which is the same exact year as the Arab-Israeli war, the first war called the Nakba, which means catastrophe, and that was when the Jewish first established their settlement and said, you know what, this is our land, and a lot of Palestinians were forced to leave their homes, and it's just so terrible because since then there have been so many Palestinian refugees who are trying to return to their homes till today. And you see in the news that there's so many protests, peaceful protests, that people are trying to, raise awareness of the issue, and Palestinians are trying to get back into their land. But unfortunately, the Israelis are, meeting these protests with violence, and there's so many casualties. We hear on the news, even today, we hear things on the news that even recently that Palestinians are being killed. There was a doctor or a medical professional who just passed away recently. There was another news article, 17 people killed in Israel, Palestinian conflict. So even right now, these news outlets are finally beginning to show the truth of what's happening. And people living in the West, even though they're usually used to hearing the pro-Israel side of things, now they're turning their heads and they're saying, wait, the Palestinians are the ones who are being killed. They're the victims. So, now, people are actually becoming aware that, maybe there are two sides to the story. Maybe the media isn't positively, accurately covering the truth. So that's a really, really important thing. And since the media is starting to do this, it's really important for us to continue going to Al-Quds, continue spreading the message, because now people are hearing it not only from us, but they're actually hearing it from other numerous news outlets that are not necessarily just Muslim news outlets. They're even American other outlets that are actually accurately covering this conflict.
Oh yes, that's very true. So looking at the Palestinian conflict, we should know that, going back to our duty as Muslims, we know that these people are being oppressed in Palestine. And did you know that Israel, even if you look on a Pakistani passport, you know that Israel isn't recognized as, a state. So basically Israel is usurping the Palestinian land. So really, how Azra mentioned that, how people are confused on which side of the conflict to be on, are we pro-Israel or are we pro-Palestine? But essentially, Israel is usurping the Palestinian land. They're being unjust to Palestinians. They're taking their land. So it's really the Palestinians who are the victims. And speaking about this, I would like to bring up a current event that just happened at the University of Houston, where we had a U.S. ambassador come. Her name was Nikki Haley, and about how she came to speak as a speaker at the University of Houston. And this actually happened in the Cullen Performance Hall, and what actually the students' response to her coming. And it was actually really amazing because really we actually saw the power of our voices through this protest, because as soon as she started speaking, they would start, the students would start protesting for Palestine. And it was honestly, I thought this was very interesting. As you can see on the screen, it shows the protest. So this is something that us as people in our society, we should look up to things like this and see, we should be coming out and doing these protests. And, this was such a risk that these students took. They could have been expelled, they could have been suspended. I mean, University of Houston, they brought... the video of the U of H protest. So really, we should look at this as a moment where we should follow in these kids' footsteps. These students were taking such a great risk, but they could have been suspended, they could have gotten in trouble. They're inviting such a person in a high position to the university, and the students, knowing the risks of what they were doing, they came out to support and combat oppression and to speak about their own feelings towards it and stand up for what they believe in. So honestly, I thought this was something that we should really look up to, and we should kind of follow in their footsteps and protest wherever we can, because we live in a country where we have the freedom of speech. So wherever we have the opportunity, freedom of assembly, we come out and do what we can to combat oppression and stand up for our beliefs and let the world know what's going on. Because people, they look at the news, if I'm online, I'm looking at the news here, there, you just kind of glance over it. Okay, this is happening in Israel, this is happening in Pakistan, whatever, blah, blah, oh, I feel really bad about them. We shouldn't just look at these things like they're just everyday stories. We should come out and do something about it and make a change. Because, this isn't only for us as Muslims, this is for humanity. It's a crime against humanity, the oppression that's going on throughout the world, and us as Muslims and us as humans, in fact, need to do what we can to combat it. So Azra, do you want to comment anything about what are your thoughts about the protest that happened?
Yes.
You attend the university also.
Yeah, I attend the University of Houston. Unfortunately, I wasn't there at this protest, but last semester there was a similar protest. I'm not sure, I forgot his name, but there was someone who was really pro-Israel and anti-Palestine who came to speak on behalf of, the Zionists there. So surprisingly, there are Zionists at the University of Houston who were there in support, for him. And what really, really made me proud of our university was that so many university organizations, we have Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP, and so many other organizations that were not necessarily Muslim groups. Other kids of different races, different ethnicities, different religions, different majors, they all came together, and there were about 100 protesters in the room. We stood up, we walked out, and we kept protesting outside so the man inside could not speak. So there was just such a wonderful moment of unity that everyone, regardless of religion or anything, they came together and they were standing up for these Palestinians. And then we went around campus protesting, holding up the Palestinian flag with the banners, and students were looking like, what's going on? And this was a great way to raise awareness in campuses because because University of Houston is one of the most diverse campuses in the nation. And since we're still young, we're not as victim to the media as some of the older people are in the generation. So we're more aware of what's going on. And if other people our age tell us the reality of what's going on in other parts of the world, then we're more likely to, do our own research and find out for ourselves. And one last thing about Nikki Haley, a lot of people might not know who she is. She's actually the U.S. ambassador, and she became quite popular on the news after a recent United Nations meeting. She actually walked out the moment the Palestinian ambassador was speaking. So the moment he started to speak, she just got up and she left the room. That was an extreme act of disrespect, and we just condemn things like this because she openly showed that we don't support Israel. And as the American ambassador, that's something really irresponsible and disrespectful to do towards another nation, especially when its people are going through so much oppression. So basically, by standing up and walking out, she refused to acknowledge Palestine as an actual state or nation, and that's why we took this protest to such an extent. And the video went viral. So many UH students came, and people who don't even go to UH, they came to protest against her, and they walked out, and the video went viral. We saw it on numerous news outlets, and it's really great that we're spreading the message that we should not sit back and let these people, take control of other countries and say, okay, this is what a country is, this is what a country is not. They don't have any right to say, what's a proper establishment and what's not a proper establishment. So it's our responsibility to stand up against all this oppression and injustice when we see it, because like Rabab said, we have the freedom of speech, the freedom of assembly, which people in other countries don't have. So if we're put in this situation, we have such a great advantage, such great opportunities and resources. We really, really need to take advantage of that and come together and, speak out about this.
Yes, Azra, I completely agree with all your points, and I love the point that you made that, we have to come in unity. These students, what they did at University of Houston and all the protests that are going on around, to combat oppression, it's the key word here is unity. They came together as one, because if there's only one person out there, it wouldn't have made a difference. But all of these students, they came together as unity, and with the power of unity, they were able to further their cause, and they were able to show the world and inform them about the oppression, so then they become more aware about the intensity of the situation. So it's very important for us, as people in general. Like I said, this is just a thing. It's not even only as a Muslims. Like, this is something that everyone should be doing, because this is we're talking about humanity here, in general. So everyone should do whatever they can to combat humanity. And so now I'd like to move into a personality of ours that I mentioned in the beginning of our program today, who essentially, he was the most oppressed person in history, and his name is Imam Ali alayhi salam. And Imam Ali alayhi salam, he was while we say that he's oppressed, because of his oppression, it's actually an oppression on the entire Muslim ummah, because Imam Ali alayhi salam, he was our leader, and then when he was oppressed, like when he wasn't given his khilafat, like before Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after he left, he said, "Man kuntu mawla fahaza aliyun mawla." After me, whoever I'm the master of, Ali is his master. But after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, the people didn't listen to him, and just from that moment and throughout his life, Imam Ali alayhi salam was so oppressed. And he's like, we should really look up to him, as a role model. And so, moving on to the Khilafat part, after he was not given the caliphate, then the other rulers, they would oppress him. They came to his house, they burned his house, they would tie him in ropes, and they would drag him. And he was really, really treated badly, and not in the way that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted him to be treated. So we should really look up to Imam Ali alayhi salam as a role model, and see what he went through, and learn from him. And like I mentioned, today's the 18th of Ramadan. We're getting into the days of his shahadat, which is on the 21st of Ramadan. So I highly encourage us to come and participate in majalis and to commemorate his passing away, because he's a very important personality. So moving on, Azra, do you want to mention anything about Imam Ali alayhi salam?
Yes. As a matter of fact, today in Houston and in many other countries across the U.S., they're holding juluses to commemorate the martyrdom of Imam Ali, and to spread the message to other people, Muslims and non-Muslims alike, as to what's going on. Why are we wearing black these days? Why are we commemorating the death of this really well-known personality? And regarding Imam Ali, I'm not going to mention all his stories, his hadith, because we've heard them so many times, and he needs no introduction. He's such an inspirational personality, honestly, to understand how much oppression he went through. Prophet Muhammad, imagine how much oppression Prophet Muhammad went through as the founder and the prophet of Islam. He was the founder of the religion, the first person to come and bring this beautiful religion to the world. And even with so many followers and so much success, Prophet Muhammad went through so much oppression. So imagine how much his successor would go through. If people would fail to even recognize the founder of the religion, imagine how much oppression the successor went through after the founder is passing away. So we really have to understand that Imam Ali came from a background of so much emotional, physical, mental abuse and trauma from the other people, because they were oppressing him. They usurped his rights. Imam Ali was supposed to be the caliph after Prophet Muhammad, but 3 caliphs came, and then Imam Ali was the 4th one. So to see him watch Prophet Muhammad establish this Islamic community, then to see the other 3 caliphs kind of almost destroy that community in a way, and kind of rule it in their own way, and then Imam Ali had to come back and fix all of those years worth of other governance, and they had to fix it and bring it back to the way of Prophet Muhammad. That took a lot of effort, and the fact that he didn't receive as much support as Prophet Muhammad, that was really, really hard on him. And it's just so inspirational to hear that he was always smiling, he was always happy, he never really lashed out on people, and he was the epitome of elegance and grace and patience and strength, because he went through so much, and regardless of all of that, he had every reason to break down every day of his life, but people could only say good things about him. He was always smiling, and he was a reflection of what Prophet Muhammad was. He was a reflection of what Islam means for a follower, for a Muslim to be. So I think that's really important for us to realize, that Imam Ali was a person who went through so much emotional, mental, physical that. and he stayed true to the mission of Allah, and he stayed true to, you know, good akhlaq, good taqwa, good morality. And that's just something that it's just so inspirational. He's literally the epitome of strength when it comes to people, and not only the Islamic ummah but just people in history throughout the world. He's up there on the top. He's the best.
Yeah, the amazing point made, Azra. You know, we should look like throughout the times that Imam Ali alayhi salam lived. You know, he lived in a time where, you know, Muslims were oppressed, and he was very, very oppressed. And speaking of his oppression, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he was very, very much disrespected. Like, for example, you know, people would be really rude to him, and he was in the time of Muawiyah, and so Muawiyah used, in his courts, he used to have people, the speakers, say all of these really negative, bad things about Imam Ali that were like the complete opposite of what he was. Because, you know, as Muslims, we know what great of a personality he was. He would go door to door at night, and he would give food to the poor. In fact, there's also a verse in the Quran that I'll mention later, but even in his ruku, like while he does namaz, while he would do namaz, he would give charity. Like, that's how great of a personality Imam Ali was. But these people during this time, this was, you know, I'm talking about his oppression, just simply like talking such negative and bad things about him, that like what people did. And so it was really, really negative towards him. And, you know, when he passed away at the mosque and they heard about this happening, they were, you know, things were so the word was so bad around that people were like, what is Imam Ali alayhi salam doing in the mosque? Like, that's how bad it was. Like, that's how negatively Muawiyah influenced these people's mindsets, because, you know, people couldn't imagine Imam Ali alayhi salam in a mosque in the first place. So it was really, really bad. But if we actually look up to this day, like years and years later, Imam Ali alayhi salam is a role model, you know, not only to Muslims, but people throughout the globe, like other people, they also recognize Imam Ali alayhi salam as a person who was a great personality. And so this kind of just teaches us that, you know, when you obey Allah, He protects you, and then He's in your favor. So even though at that time Imam Ali alayhi salam was oppressed to such great extent, now he's, you know, he's very well respected. So, you know, we have to always know that we have to do what we can and follow Allah. And if we do as Allah says, and if we follow in Imam Ali alayhi salam's footsteps, then we should know that Allah is in our favor. And like I mentioned, that, you know, Imam Ali alayhi salam is very respected today. So Azra, do you want to make a comment on that?
Yes, honestly, I was just thinking that coming from, like, you know, to really think about where Imam Ali came from, you know. So the Prophet passed away. Imam Ali was not only the first, second, or third caliph, he was the fourth. He had to establish the Islamic, you know, community after the Prophet passed away. On top of that, he wasn't receiving enough support. And then when Hazrat Fatima passed away, and we always hear about the relationship between Imam Ali and Hazrat Fatima. There was the most loving relationship of all time, and he cared for her so much. And to see her she was killed because the door hit, you know, she was, in a way, she was martyred because the door came down on her, and that's how she passed away. And her unborn child, Hazrat Muhsin, also passed away. So Imam Ali was over here, his beloved wife Hazrat Fatima was on her deathbed. His unborn child has passed away, Hazrat Muhsin, and he's looking at his 4 remaining children, and he knows that Imam Hassan is going to go through a life of such loneliness and hardship. So many people consider Imam Hassan as one of the loneliest imams because during his time he received such little support. Although Imam Hussein went through so much oppression, at least Imam Hussein has 72 beloved companions who would die for him. Imam Hassan did not have that. So Imam Ali, knowing that his children would go through so much after him, knowing that he couldn't be there for them, that would have really, really been like the worst possible position to be in, because it's a different story when you have so much responsibility over the Muslim ummah, right? You have all this, you know, all these things you have to do to establish the Muslim community and to establish what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was trying to establish before his passing away. And then on top of that, your wife passed away, your unborn child passed away, and on top of that, your own children are going through so much oppression. So it's a different thing when you yourself are going through so much pressure and through so much injustices. But when the people you love, the people who are closest to you, when you know, oppression starts coming into, you know, their life, that's when most people would just break and they'll be like, that's it, I can't do this anymore. But Imam Ali did not have that option to opt out. He knew he had to stay on the path. He had to, you know, go through with his responsibilities and with, you know, maintaining the Islamic ummah, because if he wouldn't, then the people like Yazid and Muawiyah, they would just, break down what everything Islam stood for. And that's just something that's really, really, really hard to do, and it requires so much strength to overcome all of that and to kind of get past the part that your family and your loved ones are going through this oppression, and to kind of, just stay strong on your behalf and your family's behalf, and just really, really be the successor of Islam that Prophet Muhammad and Allah meant for Imam Ali to be.
Yeah. So Azra, that's very, very great point that you made, because Imam Ali, like we stressed before, that he lived in a time where he was oppressed so much, like Azra mentioned, like in a time where he knew his family had such a fate, but he was able to hold it together. If any of us were in that position, I don't think we would be able to continue to spread Islam and do whatever Imam Ali did. So he was in such a hard and difficult and stressful position. But for Islam, he was able to effectively spread the message and follow Allah's orders. So it was like that's why we have to look up to him, like look up to his personality, because he did so much for us. And following in his footsteps, going back to the idea of oppression in the world today, the least we can do is, come out and protest. Like, for example, the Quds protest that is happening this Friday, So I encourage you all, we should all go and participate in that. And going back to the idea of oppression, in Ziyarat al-Warisa, which is a ziyarat that we read, it says that may lanat be on those who murdered and oppressed Imam Hussein al-Islam, and those that were there and saw it happening and didn't do anything. So looking at this ziyarat and this line from the ziyarat, if we look at this, we see that it's very critical for us that if we see oppression happening around us, it is our duty to do something about it, It's saying, lanat be on those who are just there and aren't doing anything. So directly from the ziyarat, we're seeing that, it's our duty to come out and do something to combat oppression. Because, this is not only an issue for Muslims, it's a matter of humanity, Oppression is a crime against humanity. And it is our duty as humans to further the message of Allah and follow in Imam Ali's footsteps. So moving on along, so do you have any comment for that, Azra, if you want to add anything?
Yes, there's actually hadith. It's a well-known hadith, I'm paraphrasing, but basically whoever watches oppression and remains silent about it is as guilty of the oppression themselves as the oppressors. It's a very well-known hadith. We all know that it exists. The bystanders, because it's a whole different story if you're the oppressor, right? If you're going and you're killing someone, you're taking away their rights, but for you to just be like, you're still innocent before you're a bystander, right? You're just standing here and you're just watching these innocent people being killed or being oppressed, and you're literally doing nothing. So being a bystander is a whole different level of oppression, because even though you're not actually actively taking away their rights or killing their families, you're watching it and not doing anything about it. And that requires like a certain level of like inhumane characteristics to just watch that and literally feel even if you feel sadness, like, oh, I wish I could do something, you should do something, because these people, they do not have a voice of their own. We see on the news the Palestinians are trying to protest. It's not like we're doing all the protests in the heat in Ramadan and they're sitting doing nothing. No, they're protesting as well, but the difference between us and them is that when we protest, people actually turn their heads and they read our pamphlets. When the Palestinians protest, they get killed. And you see that on the news. So if they don't have the opportunities that we do, isn't it our responsibility as Muslims, or just as humans, to stand up for these people? Not just as Muslims. I read this one poster. It was a really wonderful poster. This young boy was holding it up during one of the protests in the previous years. He said, to stand up for Palestine, you don't have to be Muslim. You just have to be human. And that's so true, because you don't have to be a Muslim to understand the struggles that other people are going through, to understand how painful it must be to watch people be taken away from their home, to watch them be separated from their families, to watch them be brutally killed for the smallest of offenses, like protesting peacefully. So really it's a matter of humanity. It's just, you have to be a human to understand that we need to stand up for these issues. And Al-Quds Day is a really important day. For those of you everyone knows what Al-Quds Day is, but on the chance that you don't, the last Friday of every Ramadan, people from all over the world, this is not just a local, regional, national gathering. It's an international thing that the international global community comes together on a large scale and protests every last Friday of Ramadan every year, and they come and they protest against Israel. They spread awareness to the public about what's going on in Palestine, because the reality of the situation is that the media isn't properly covering what's happening. And if you go on Facebook and if you read all the comments, a lot of people actually think that the Palestinians are the terrorists, and that Israel is actually doing the world a favor by ending the Palestinian community. So it's really, really terrible, and you have to be so careful, because the media can make the oppressors look like the victims, and they can make the victims look like the oppressors. So it is so important for us to raise awareness on this issue and tell the American public and the general public that no, Israel is the one that's oppressing the Palestinians, and we have to really use this opportunity to bring out our voices and to give a voice for those who don't have a voice for themselves, because if they speak out, they get killed. If we speak out, we actually get proper positive attention in that regard. So it's really, really, really important for us, because it's our responsibility. Allah put us in this situation. He gave us the means to go out to protest, to spread the message, while other people don't have the means to do that. So it's our responsibility, and we cannot be bystanders. That is not an exception, because on the Day of Judgment, Allah will ask, you saw all this happening, what did you do about it? And if we say we did nothing, then that's not an answer to give.
Yeah, Azra, that's a very, very beautiful point, re-emphasizing the fact that, it's our duty not only as Muslims but as humans to stand up against this oppression, because if let's look at the idea of bullying. People are always saying, if you see someone being bullied, if your friend is being bullied, would you just stand there and watch your friend being bullied? No, you would do something about it. So these Palestinians and all across the globe, in Syria, in Pakistan, in India, in Myanmar, wherever these things are happening, we should not be the bystander that just stands there and does nothing. We have to do something about it. And the thing we can do is come out and protest and, stand up for these people's rights, because if they try to do it, like Azra mentioned, what happens to them? They get killed. But we're in such a, a really safe position, we're living in America, and like I mentioned before, we have the freedom of speech. We have the freedom of assembly. And, this is written in our Constitution. So if we're given such an easy right, and all we have to do is go out and protest and speak out for these people, why not do it, So we need to come together. And another theme that we mentioned before, we need to come together in unity and do what we can to combat this, not only as Muslims, but as humans in general. And like Azra mentioned, the media kind of manipulates our minds. They say that, the Israel is the good side and Palestine is the bad side. But clearly, we know that Israel is usurping their land. Israel is oppressing them. So with the knowledge we know, we have to let the people who don't know as much and just depend on the media for all their information, we have to feed them the right information, or else the media is going to manipulate their minds, and they're not even going to know the true story of what's going on. And really, our duty is to let these people know what oppression is, and and realize that they need to do something about it, because this is a crime against humanity, and as humans we should be coming out and protesting and doing what we can to help these people, because even though they're standing up for themselves, it's not enough, because they're being killed. But we, as people who are living here, are really stressing this point that we have to do what we can. And things like this is, there's a julus going on as we speak right now, and attending these juluses, and it's happening in Houston and really different parts of the country. So if locally, I know they do it in New York and in Dallas. So if you're in a city, find out if there's a julus happening nearby, go to it, and keep these things in mind, that we're doing this for Imam Ali alayhi salam, we're doing this for humanity, we're helping these people who are being oppressed, and it'll bring a really good feeling to your heart that I'm doing something for them. And this is really essentially what we can do at this point in our lives, like where we're living in 21st century America. So I feel like that's a very important point. Now I'd like to go back to our great personality, Imam Ali alayhi salam, and kind of just emphasize on his personality, and kind of talk about how he's an inspiration for us, and kind of get into a discussion about that. So one thing that I'd like to mention is that Imam Ali alayhi salam was the epitome of bravery. Like Azra mentioned before, like for example, lots of people now, if we look now that, lots of people do prayers, and those are the people who do prayers all the time. But, at the same time, these people, you wouldn't expect these people who are doing prayers all the time to be out and fighting in the battlefield. But if we look at Imam Ali alayhi salam, he was a great worshipper. He would worship so much, he would worship all the time. But at the same time, he would come out and he would fight for Islam, he would do jihad, he would fight for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he was able to do both of these things. And looking back at him, we have to see that, he was going through such tough times and going through such oppression. His family was oppressed, they were being killed. And he had so much to handle, and he was treated so badly, like I mentioned before. Instead of being given the caliphate, they would drag him around on his neck because he wouldn't do bayat to the people who were the caliphs. So essentially, in the state that Imam Ali was in, he still depicted bravery, He was able to balance both of these things. And now I'd like to further on move on to kind of like a story. It was the Battle of Khaybar. So it was like, I know you all probably know this story where, Imam Ali there was a battle going on between the Muslims and the Jews, and the Muslims were trying to get their land, and the Jews were blocking them from getting it. And actually what was happening during this time, that Imam Ali he actually had an eye infection. So just imagine, if you're not really feeling well and you have a terrifying eye infection, what state you would be in. But this war was about to happen. And so what happened was, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that, I'm going to give, he needed someone to fight, right? And he said he's going to give a flag to the person who would go and be the warrior and who would fight and would lead, And so people were expecting, it's going to be us. So all night they were tossing, turning to be like, it's going to be one of us, And they would never expect who the Prophet would pick. And interestingly, the Prophet picked Imam Ali alayhi salam to come and fight in this battle. So Imam Ali alayhi salam, as I mentioned before, he had an eye infection. But what the Prophet did was, he took his saliva and he put it on Imam Ali alayhi salam's eye, and instantly, it was a miracle. The infection was gone, and Imam Ali alayhi salam was back to health. And people were surprised, we never would expect that Imam Ali alayhi salam would be chosen for such a task, to defeat these Jews and get the land back. So Imam Ali alayhi salam, not only was he chosen, when he got to the battlefield, he did so much. He was able to, split, the enemy was marhab, and he was able to split him, and he put his sword Zulfiqar on the head, and he was able to go through the steel armor. Even if you take a knife and you try to do that to a piece of wire, it's really hard to cut that wire, but he was, with his strength and his Zulfiqar, he was able to split the enemy in half. And so looking at his strength and bravery through the times that he was going through, it really shows us, how Imam Ali alayhi salam is the epitome of bravery in his time. And also, to get the land back, there used to be this really large door. I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of this. That it would take 60 people to just open that one door. But Imam Ali alayhi salam, with one hand, he was able to take it, and then he would put it on a ditch. So then the Muslims were able to walk on the ditch, so it kind of formed like a bridge, and they were able to get their land back. So if we look at Imam Ali alayhi salam, we see that he was such a brave person, and he would do whatever for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the Muslims. So knowing what he's done for us, we should feel that it is our job to stand up against oppression and follow his message. So speaking of Imam Ali alayhi salam, going back to you, Azra, do you want to tell us how he's an inspiration to you?
Yes. Imam Ali, well, there's so many reasons why he's an inspiration, but I think the biggest reason is because of the fact that no matter what he did, he kept it a secret. He didn't publicize his good deeds. And we hear of so many stories that Imam Ali would hide his identity, and he would go in the night and give out food to the poor, to the homeless, to the orphans, to the widows, and he would take care of people. And he didn't always ask, he never asked for appreciation. He didn't care if people, knew he was the one who did it or not. All he cared about was the fact that the people, his ummah, they were taken care of, and the fact that Allah knew that he was doing this. So, after his death, a lot of people, they realized that, oh my God, the man who was coming and helping us at night was Imam Ali, because after he passed away, no one came. So that's when they realized Imam Ali was working hours, he was up in the nights to not only do namaz al-shab, but to also help other people. He always put others before himself. And it makes you kind of realize that of all the stories and hadith and, of the qualities we hear about Imam Ali, imagine how many there are that we don't hear about him. because Imam Ali lived over 1,000 years ago. So everything we know about him, because of the hadith and because of the stories and the narrations that are passed down from generation to generation. So imagine, I think for every one hadith or story or quality we know about him, there are 10 others that we don't know about him. And it's just so wonderful to know that just knowing almost only 1/10 of his personality, we love him that much. Imagine if we actually knew how he was in his, in real life. If he was standing here before us, he would be 10 times as wonderful as we always hear him to be. So it's just, food for thought, because the imams, the prophets, they never did things for publicity. A lot of things they did in secret. They did things in the secret of the night, and they kept it between them and Allah. So just to know that these personalities, the few things that were known to the public, just those few things alone are enough to make our hearts, tremble with love. Imagine how many, imagine the true essence of their characteristics and the true essence of their personality and who they were as people. It's just so beautiful to know that these are our role models, and these are the flag bearers of our religion, and we're so proud to be followers of this religion. And it's a wonderful reflection on the Prophet Muhammad, because if Imam Ali was such a great personality, just imagine how Prophet Muhammad was. And it's just so great. So I think Imam Ali is inspirational because he never did things for the favor of the public. He got it because he was so good with akhlaq and taqwa and all these things, but just he did things for Allah, and he did things for the pure intention of helping the ummah, and his success and his honor came later. So in Islam they say if you take care of your relationship with Allah, Allah will take care of your relationship with everyone else, and that's what we see in Imam Ali's life as well.
Yeah, so that's a really amazing point. That's beautiful how you said that, he inspires you, and how he should inspire all of us. That he had such a great personality, and we only know, like Azra mentioned, we know knowing what we know about his personality, which is like a small amount. Like imagine he's 10 times that. Like he has such a great and elevated personality, and it is so important for us to look up to him and to follow his ideals. And I actually have a Quran in front of me, and there's verses in the Quran that actually refer to Imam Ali alayhi salam, like they're dedicated towards Imam Ali alayhi salam. So one is actually in Surah Ma'idah, which is the 5th surah, in verse 55. I'm going to recite the verse, and then I'll give you the translation of that. So, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Innama waliyakumullahu wa rasuluhu wallazina amanu allazina yuqimuna as-salata wa yu'tuna az-zakata wa hum raki'un. And this ayat means that your guardian is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his apostle, and the faithful who maintain the prayer and give the zakat while bowing down. So this last part of this ayat, which says and the faithful who maintain the prayer and give the zakat while bowing down, this part is actually referring to Imam Ali alayhi salam, because while he was in ruku, even doing namaz, he would give charity, he would do such a good deed. So that's why there's this whole ayat in the Quran in Surah Ma'idah dedicated to Imam Ali alayhi salam. So looking at him, we have to realize that he was such a great personality, and that we really should look up to him as our main role model, and we should follow in his footsteps. And knowing that the oppression that he went through, we really need to try to make that difference. And going back, I know I keep going back to the idea of Quds Day, but this was something that Imam Khomeini started, and it's done, like Azra mentioned, on the last Friday of every Ramadan. So upcoming this Friday, it'll actually happen. And the details, I'll give you the details for the Houston protest. It's gonna happen on Friday. As you can see here, it's going to happen on Friday, June 8th from 3:30 to 5 p.m. at Westheimer and Post Oak. So if you can, please try to make it, because your presence will make a great difference to the protest. Because as I mentioned before, that's really our duty as humans, in fact, not only as Muslims, as humans, to come out and to combat oppression. So I highly encourage you all to come to this Quds protest. Do you have any comments would you like to make on the ayat or anything?
Yes. If we're gonna stay on the topic of Imam Ali, it's just really sad to think about how many beautiful words he said that were never heard, how many actions he did that were never witnessed, how many things he said that were never recorded. So it's just really, really kind of food for thought, because the Imams, they had a whole different side of their personality. And it would make so much sense for Imam Ali to publicize everything that he did, to openly go out in the middle of the day and give charity. But no, he purposely did it in, the darkness of the night, because he wanted to maintain that secrecy and to hide his good deeds. Because it made sense for him to do it in the day, because he went through so much, oppression and injustice, and people were so against him that if he openly showed his, wonderful characteristics, people would have actually favored him more. So if he went around doing charity and, saying all these things, doing these things during the day, which he did, but if he did everything during the day, what people saw, then he would receive so much public favor. He would be like, everyone would be his number one fan. But he didn't do that. He specifically did a lot of things, hidden from the people, because he knew that his point in life wasn't to win the favor of the public, it was to win the favor of Allah. And because he did that, he may have had a hard life. Wmaybe during his life he didn't receive as much support as he deserved, but afterwards, even over 1,000 years after his death, he has the whole world is commemorating him and his wonderful personality. And now to come back to Al-Quds Day, I just want to mention something. A lot of us might think that we're just, going there and standing and just holding up signs, but no, every year there's actually an anti-Palestine protest on the other side. I actually wasn't aware of this until one year they actually had quite a few people. There's a pro-Israel side to the protests as well. I'm not sure if this happens in every city, but in Houston for sure you see a bunch of people standing on the other side of the street. They have pro-Zionist signs, they have the Israel flag, and they're actually protesting against us. So it's really important for us to come in large numbers and to show that we're the side that is the truth, because it's so sad if this year that if the Israel side is the one that has the larger numbers, because they're the ones who are wrong. So us being on the side of haqq, being on the side of truth, we need to come out and show people that we're confident in what we know, because it is the truth, and this is what you should believe in. Because if there are more Israel people there, then the people passing by will look at the Israel protesters and they're going to, fall victim to their misinformation. So it's really important that we come out and spread the message and, bring signs, bring pamphlets, and just, let people know that the reality of the situation is that Palestine is the country that is the victim of the oppressors, and really, really raise awareness. I mean, there's a difference between just angrily shouting at chants like, oh, death to Israel, Palestine's, the best. These are just pointless statements that people would not really understand if you come and tell them, right? Because their whole life they hear the media saying, Israel's right, Palestine's wrong. So if suddenly you say, oh my God, death to Israel, they'll be like, wait, what? So approach the situation with caution and with intelligence. Have an intelligent conversation with them. Tell them facts that they know, facts that they can research. Tell them, did you know the United States gives $3 billion, not million, $3 billion to Israel every single year in foreign aid? If you do your math, that's around $10 million a day. So while the United States is in so much debt, why are we giving that much money to Israel? What is Israel doing for us? And do you actually believe that Palestinians are the terrorists and that Israel is the victim? So really give people, the names of correct media outlets so that they could do their research with actual authentic sources, so give them kind of a means to actually do their own research and to find out the truth on their own, instead of just, throwing a blanket statement that, oh, okay, Palestine, they're being oppressed. Tell them why they're being oppressed. Tell them what's happening. Give them information, not just, pointless words, because when you give people food for thought, that's when they'll use their own mind to think, okay, maybe something isn't adding up with the media. Maybe Israel really is the one that's the oppressor.
Yeah, so Azra, that's a very great point that you made here, that it's very important that we come in large numbers. Like Azra said, there's like an anti-Palestine protest that's going on like on the opposite side. So we need to, knowing that they're there, we have to make sure that we're in greater numbers. So then the people, because remember, it's our duty. The purpose of a protest isn't just to stand there and just say stuff just for whatever. It's to influence the mindsets of the people around us so they know essentially what the situation is, and to hopefully bring change in what's happening. Like Azra said, I didn't know this myself, that that the United States gives $3 billion to Israel every day. That's like 10 million every day, like Azra mentioned. Like that's a lot of money. Like they keep saying that the United States is in debt, but look at all of the money that they're giving to Israel, and like for what purposes, So we have to really realize, and we have to know ourselves this information, and we have to be able to spread this information to the people. And like a great point that Azra mentioned, like, you know, how the media is kind of influencing and feeding people the wrong information, that, you know, is pro-Israel, you know, Israel is the good side. And if you suddenly are going to come and tell them, no, you know, Palestine is the right side and Israel is wrong, people are going to be confused. And that's kind of the whole point of us going out to protest, is to show that, you know, why, and like the information behind why Israel is the bad side and how Palestine is the good side, and how everyone should come together and stand up for this humane cause. So it's really, really important how we come in our large numbers and try to influence these people. So that's why I highly encourage you to come to Al-Quds. Again, you guys can see that which is going to be happening this Friday in Houston and all around the globe. This is just like the Houston information, but, you know, at Westheimer and Post Oak, I highly encourage you all to come and to stand up for these rights. You know, come hold signs and, you know, help to make a difference, because, you know, this is the way you can come and make a difference. And tell your friends, tell your family to come with a lot of people, because, you know, we need to show them that we're in greater numbers, and we need to really show them that, you know, we're right and we have to go for this humane cause. So going back to Imam Ali Islam, I actually have another verse. I'm kind of like flipping between Imam Ali Islam, because, you know, he's very important personality in these days, you know, or especially dedicated towards him too, as his shahadat is approaching. But there's another verse in the Holy Quran that mentions Imam Ali alayhi salam, and this is in Surah Ibrahim. And so the verse is verse 44, and it says, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Qul kafa billahi shahidan baini wa bainakum wa man indahu ilmul kitab." And so the translation of this ayat is, say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala suffices as a witness between me and you, and he who possesses the knowledge of the book. So again here, the Imam Ali Islam is the person who possesses the knowledge of the book, because Imam Ali Islam, he knew, he memorized the entire Quran. So this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that Allah himself is a witness, and next to him Imam Ali alayhi salam is a witness. So if we're seeing at the level how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at the level he's portraying Imam Ali alayhi salam at, you know, it's a very high level, you know. And so this, in the Holy Quran, we see that there are so many references of Imam Ali Islam. This just kind of indicates to us what the level of his personality, you know, and looking up towards him. So, sorry, that was actually Surah Rad. I said the wrong surah. It was, this ayat was from Surah Rad. So again, looking at these references from the Holy Quran, we have to really see the level and the importance of his personality. So Azra, do you want to add anything to kind of conclude today's discussion?
Yes, to conclude, please attend Al-Quds Day. And you don't need an Al-Quds Day to spread the message. You know, just start a conversation with someone. Tell them what's happening in Palestine. They don't have to be Muslim, non-Muslim, whoever they are. Just tell them, start a conversation. Tell them, you know, have an intellectual, you know, discussion with them about what's happening. Give them facts, give them information so that they can go home and do research on the matter. And just, you know, start conversations. It's as simple as that throughout the year. You don't need to wait for the one day of the year, Al-Quds Day, to come out and, you know, stand up for the Palestinians. It's something that's an ongoing process. So really, it's our responsibility every day in our lives. Whenever, you know, that topic does come up, do mention the Palestinians, and don't be afraid of receiving backlash, because, you know, you need to stand up for what is right, even if you're standing alone. That's a quote, well-known quote. So please continue to spread awareness, because if the Palestinians are trying, and it's really, really hard for them. So it's our responsibility as Muslims and as human beings to really, really be a voice for those who cannot be heard with a voice of their own.
Yeah, and looking also at this, you know, I'd like to mention again that we're getting tonight is actually the first night of Laylatul Qadr. You know, they're on the odd nights of last odd nights of Ramadan, the 19th, the 21st, and the 23rd. We should really keep these people and our family, you know, in our prayers, and know that these nights are very, very valuable for us. You know, these are like those 3 nights in the year where, you know, our duas for the next year are sure to come true. So these are like highly recommend that, you know, we pray on these nights for these people. And I would also like to mention that we present our condolences for the Prophet ﷺ and the Ahlul Bayt ﷺ for the shahadat of Imam Ali ﷺ, as that date on the 21st of Ramadan is also approaching. So knowing that of these important dates in our mind, I highly encourage that we do what we can in these few days, including going to the Al-Quds protest with our family and our friends, and just doing what we can and making the most out of these last few nights of Ramadan. You know, Ramadan, I feel like it's gone by very, very fast, and I think we really need to make the most of these nights, because these are these few critical nights in the year where we get to do these things. So with that, I'd like to conclude our program, and I'd like to thank Azra for joining us today and for these past few sessions. So and that's you perspectives.